Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Refine Your Revenue Model. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races and industries and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. Also, let us know where you're dialing in from. We always love to connect. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, we like to launch a couple polls to just step back and see how everyone is doing today. So this first one is going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? And I'll give it just a few moments for everyone to submit a response here. Thank you, thank you. Awesome. I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Looks like optimism is in the lead. We always love to see that, but definitely have some feelings of anxiety and surviving. So I'm hopeful that our conversation today might help with some of those feelings. I'm going to stop sharing this one and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? And this one just tells us a little bit more about your current entrepreneurial needs so that we can keep providing relevant programming to all of you. Awesome. We got folks from Virginia, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, Texas, Georgia, Massachusetts, Georgia, Ohio, Garden State. Oh, I'm not familiar. I'm sorry. Egypt, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, South Carolina. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Going to end this poll and share these results. All right. Looks like finance is in the lead. Sales and marketing coming up behind. Thank you. We'll take this into account. And we just have one more quick poll to share with all of you. And this one is just going to be a little bit of a deeper dive into operations. So what part of operations do you need the most help with at the moment? Project management, operations and procedures, production, logistics, manufacturing and distribution, or organizational structure? I'll give this one just a couple more seconds before we dive into the conversation. Awesome. Thanks everyone for participating. I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Operations and procedures coming up in front, but we got needs all across the board. Thank you all again for participating in these polls. I'm going to stop sharing this one. And without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, Stacie Sussman, CRO of RevUp Advisory. Stacie, it is so awesome to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. And just before we dive in, do you maybe just want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are and the work you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I hear everyone's calling from all over the world, so that's amazing. My name is Stacie Sussman. I am the CRO of RevUp Advisory, and I work with scale-up companies. What is a scale-up company? It's a company that's doing roughly 2 to 5 million in ARR. They're scaling up to an enterprise level, and they've hit a growth plateau. They want to scale, they want to get to the next peak, but they don't really know how to get there. So I come in and work with the founding team, the business owners, and the C-suite to develop people that can do it, processes and operations along the customer journey that can get us there. And we work through marketing, sales, revenue, the systems, all that kind of exciting stuff that gets you to the next growth goal that you're looking to achieve.
Awesome. So you're really touching all parts of the business, which is great. So for our conversation today, we're talking about revenue modeling. For those who may not know, can you just start by explaining what is revenue modeling and why is it important for every business to support operations?
Yes, revenue modeling is super important, and it's not to be confused with business modeling. You actually need both, but today we're just going to be talking about revenue modeling. So revenue modeling is the process by which the business projects the future revenues that they expect to earn. We're talking their products, their services, their other income streams. We're talking factors such as pricing, sales volumes, market trends, seasonal factor, and sort of anything else you can think of. It's how the company ultimately makes money at the end of the day.
Right. And so when we're talking about revenue modeling, like what are some of the different ways that this can take form? Like, do you have any examples of kind of like how this looks for different kinds of businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So different businesses are going to have different revenue models, and different businesses maybe cross-pollinate across some revenue models. I typically work with B2B SaaS companies or legacy disruptors and innovators that want to act like a SaaS company. And so those folks are usually doing kind of a few different models, and I'm going to get into that. So one's a subscription-based modeling. So a customer pays a reoccurring fee to get continuous access to a service. So think of your streaming networks, your Hulus, your Disney Pluses, your Apple TV, YouTube TV, any of those things. You pay a monthly fee. I just got an email this morning that says my monthly bundle for Hulu is going up to and price.
All too real.
Got you. They're gonna get me. Also, the modeling that some other SaaS companies use is freemium modeling. So basically you offer sort of a basic service, and then you're going to charge more for advanced features or functionalities. So a really good one of this, I'm a big fan of Miro. It's a visual mapping tool that I use for a lot of customer journey mapping with my clients. And Miro, I have all these boards for different clients, and then a board for Rev Up Advisory. And recently I got this little ding that's like, you can't create any more boards because you're now out of features. You're not able to create any more boards. So now I have to pay for Miro, and I've upgraded from the freemium model to more of like that SaaS subscription modeling.
Sure.
There are other modelings that are out there, so I'm just going to touch upon a few of them. I come from an advertising background, so there's ad-based revenue modeling. For those YouTube junkies, I have kids. My children love to watch Paw Patrol on YouTube. And right in the middle of their Paw Patrol episode is toys. What genius modeling right there. That's ad-based modeling. You're watching a show, you're watching a program, and there's targeted advertising messaging that relates to what the show is about. There's also affiliate marketing. If you guys are familiar with the D'Amelio show or Charlie D'Amelio, I feel like she's a really good example, and the Kardashians, of affiliate marketing. I feel like Charlie D'Amelio they have a shoe line. Did you know they had a shoe line? But they would be paid to say, every morning I wake up and put on my L'Oreal face cream, and these are the 3 products that I use. That is a perfect example of affiliate marketing. The D'Amelios are being paid for that. Licensing, I feel like, is another big one. If you haven't seen the Barbie movie, you may be living under a rock. I feel like it was Barbie everything this summer.
Right?
Pink is the hottest color in fashion. I feel like birthday parties, happy hours, everyone was having some sort of pink party this summer. That is licensing, where you're permitting another company to use your intellectual property in exchange for a fee. So in that example, I looked up the Barbie movie, which I find just fascinating on so many levels, is grossing about $1 billion. And of that $1 billion, 12.5 million of that went to licensing for Mattel, the Barbie name. And that's not talking about toys. That's talking about just licensing it out to other partners. That's incredible, incredible. And some other ones, franchising. I feel like who doesn't love the Golden Arches? McDonald's. McDonald's is a huge franchise. You can find it anywhere in the world, but the ingredients might taste a little bit differently, because if you're going to Germany or you're going to California, it's going to taste differently. Crowdfunding is another one, which is really popular for SaaS companies that are coming up in the ranks, something like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or an I Fund Women, raising small amounts of money for a large number of people. They're typically early adopters, and they're getting some sort of reward or access to giving a small increment of money. So those are just some examples. And really, at the end of the day, the choice of your revenue modeling can really influence your company's operations, strategic decisions, overall profitability. So it's something to definitely think of as you enter the market.
Awesome. Awesome. That's super helpful. And so when we're thinking about any of these models, it's going to be influenced by your pricing strategy. So how exactly does that work? How does your pricing strategy impact your revenue model? Do you have any examples maybe of how that can lead to, like, a certain pricing strategy can lead to different revenue outcomes?
Yeah, great question. I mean, pricing strategy is so essential to the larger component of your revenue modeling. It determines the amount of money that you're going to earn for a product, for a service. And it's just a really important positioning standpoint. It's crucial for figuring out your profit margins versus your sales volume. Sometimes companies have high margins, lower volume. Sometimes companies have lower price points, higher volume. It really sort of depends. So I'm just going to give you some examples. Value-based pricing, I like to think of LVMH. I think that's like a really good example. It's like this aspirational luxury. It's like setting the price based on this like perceived value of the goods. And so if you want that LVMH, and I feel like, you know, musicians and rappers have really elevated the brand on this one. If you want that wallet or the luggage tag or anything like that, it's like you're going to pay a higher price because it's the perceived value of the luxury good. Right. Dynamic pricing is another one, which I think is super interesting with the airline industry. Spirit Airlines. I don't know if you guys have flown Spirit Airlines lately, but you have to pay for everything. And then the time of day sort of dictates how much it's going to be. So if you're taking a flight at 9 a.m. in the morning, that's probably going to be a higher price point because of supply and demand versus 11 p.m. with a layover that gets you in at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you're going to have to pay for Wi-Fi, luggage, extra leg room. It's just a really interesting model. And I feel like the airline industry is really squeezing out this sort of dynamic pricing modeling. Freemium pricing is a new one. We talk about freemium pricing in the revenue modeling, but an example of this from a tech perspective would be Dropbox, right? You can use Dropbox. It's a free resource. You can put in photos, you can put in documents, but when you get to a certain point of usage or a large enough file size, or you're out of cloud storage, they're going to say, if you want to continue to use Dropbox, you're going to start having to pay for it. So those are just a few examples of different modelings and a few examples of some, you know, real life brands that do those models.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's going to depend obviously on like whatever, like you're going to have to look at your own business and like really figure out what's going to work for your business. But it's good to just be informed about like all of these different kind of strategies that exist, you know, and, you know, ones that we maybe didn't even touch on that are there for you to kind of explore.
Exactly. And talking to your customer, I think when you're figuring this out, there's an exercise called like voice of customer that I think is really important to note for folks that are just starting out. Have interviews with your customers. You should interview 100 potential or customers, because likely the customer is going to tell you what they want, how they want it, how you can find them. And I think that's sometimes a missed opportunity for folks.
Totally, totally. It's like start with the customer. It's just a really, really great kind of point to go off of always when you're looking to hone your strategy in that area. So um talking about the B2B landscape, we have a lot of entrepreneurs kind of working on B2B ventures. So revenue models can often involve multiple streams of revenue. So how might businesses effectively optimize revenue while managing these intricate interactions between different revenue streams?
Yeah, I mean, start small, entrepreneurs, I would say. The more I like to use the framework, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The more you get more mature and through a growth stage in your business, you can add sort of all these complexities, but think about it is core revenue stream. So what is your core service or what is your core stream? So for me, for example, for RevUp Advisory, my core service is fractional CRO consulting. And so at the end of the day, I'm working with the C-suite and the founders put together these frameworks and strategies that basically this whole discussion is about. So that is a core revenue stream. But then companies have secondary and tertiary revenue streams. And so for me, a secondary revenue stream would be being able to teach a course at a university, or I'm a paid or equity advisor to some scaling startups that are kind of growing and figuring it out. And so there's different ways to think about it, but I would say start with the core revenue stream. Like your entire business is going to be built on these core revenue streams. It's usually going to make up 70 to 80 potentially % of your business. And then the secondary and tertiary revenue streams make up maybe 20 or 30%. And you can scale those up and down depending, but you got to start somewhere. So that's really, really important.
Right, right. And like I feel like we talk about this kind of like with marketing too as well. It's like you have kind of like your main channel and you have other channels that are kind of like maybe a secondary channel, but it's like you want to keep that focus on like what's really bringing in the engagement, and in this case you want to keep the focus on like what's really bringing in the revenue. So I think that's just an awesome way to frame it.
And don't get too scattered. I feel like that's big advice for entrepreneurs that I have. And that's what I spend a lot of time with my C-suite and stakeholders is like the alignment on that. It's like, oh, we have 70 great ideas of how we're going to do revenue. So then it's like, what is your like core must-have revenue stream? And then let's put the others in the nice-to-have revenue streams. And when we have the mechanics of that first one going and firing at all cylinders, then we can kind of bring one or two in from the, maybe let's try it out kind of side of the business.
Yeah, love it. So I think, when talking about revenue modeling, financial reporting rules can be really helpful to kind of just improve transparency and accountability. So can you talk about maybe like how exactly, incorporating financial reporting rules into your revenue model can optimize it, and what challenges might arise at the same time from implementation?
Yes, know your numbers. This is so important. A lot of companies are like, I'm not going to know my numbers because that's not my strong suit. Well, make it your strong suit. And I think in the B2B SaaS landscape, financial people and there's non-financial people, and that's okay. But you have to come to a common ground to sort of understanding what your numbers are. It's super important to establish financial reporting. You need to get clarity around your numbers. I have entrepreneurs and business owners that have gone out of business because they didn't know their numbers and they were like, that was a big lesson learned. So I feel like it's super important knowing your numbers. Here's a few reasons why. One, it creates standardization. Financial reporting is so important. If you're going to get fundraising, outside investors, bank loans, partners, it creates a standardization for you to sort of put everyone on an even playing field to understand that. It builds trust at the end of the day. Like I said, you're raising capital, you're securing a loan. It is so important that you know your numbers. These people that are going to hand you money are going to want to trust that you know the financial numbers of your business. Also, internally, I know a lot of companies have multiple members of the board, multiple members of the C-suite. There's co-founders, 2 people, 3 people I usually see, or solopreneurs. And so there has to be a common language that everyone's going to speak to know their numbers. And what I think this ultimately boils down to is creating like data-backed decisions about your company. So I'm love gut instinct, but that should only be a smaller percent of the larger picture of knowing your numbers. And gut instinct means you think something, you have experience doing it, you worked at another competitor that did something similarly, but you need to know the numbers and have the modeling in order to be there. And also work with a CFO, work with a fractional CFO, create some sort of modeling. Simple, don't make it crazy. Just start somewhere. And it's a way to hold yourself accountable to fiscal management of the company, your revenue, your expenses, assets, liabilities. It's just like a way to accurately project the holistic view of kind of the health of the business, whether it's good or bad. And it's important to know what direction it's heading.
Sure. And then what kinds of challenges might arise when you're kind of implementing these financial reporting rules into your revenue model?
Yeah, great question. I think initially it gets complex. Why people are scared of it is like, this is scary. I'm not a finance person. I don't know what this language is. That's okay. Get someone to dumb it down, explain it in sort of plain English, slow down the process, and create something really basic. I think one negative effect it can have without knowing the numbers is there could be a short-term negative perception about your company because you don't know your numbers and you're missing a quarter, or you're missing your goal, or you're missing a KPI, or something's down and you don't know why. If you knew your numbers, you'd be able to project in the future how it's going now and sort of how it's going in the future. Super important. And I think being flexible is really, really important to understand the situation. There's market concerns, there's trends in the industry, there's competitors that come up. All these things end up becoming factors in what your financial modeling looks like. And it's important to stay abreast of all that.
Awesome. Super helpful. So when a lot of the entrepreneurs in our audience are, we're all kind of like at different stages of the product life cycle, but, how can entrepreneurs kind of align their revenue model regardless of what stage of the product life cycle they find themselves in, and how might that model evolve over time as they kind of transition from like that stage of initial market penetration towards like growth and maturity later on?
Yeah, I love the analogy, and I use a lot of analogies, is crawl, walk, run. So I think that's kind of what you're describing. There's like the foundational stage, low price, you're figuring out your MVP, you may have some premium features, you may offer some discounts for early adopters. You're just trying to figure it out and make sure really that you like have a business at the end of the day. And then you move to the growth stage where you're like, oh, sweet, we're gaining traction. People are paying us for a service. People are buying things. We're going to create maybe a subscription or a freemium model. Maybe our deal size went from a few $100s to thousands of dollars, or in my client's case, thousands to tens of thousands, or sort of 7-figure deals. And now you're going to add this complexity of add-on features. You're going to cross-sell them to different revenue streams. You're going to upsell them. You're going to renew them. And then you're going to get to the maturity phase, which I think is one of the things you were talking about, Michelle, is you want these long-term relationships with clients that are going to renew year over year. And the lifetime value of the customer isn't just that one deal that you've had. It's 3 to 5 years in the future, which really propel your business forward and is huge. And then you're going to have downturns, and that's 90% of startups fail. Isn't that the stat? And so you're gonna have to reinvent yourself. You're gonna have to go into a new market. You're gonna have to change your ICP. You're gonna have to think about what that looks like. And some companies are declining. I work with a 30-year-old company, and they all base their whole business on referrals. And now in year 31, they're like, we have to go out and do lead gen and drive demand. And we don't know how to do that. And we don't know what lead gen and demand gen even is, because our phones have been ringing.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's a whole nother ball game, and that's okay. And that honestly, that's like a good problem to have, because you don't want to have market saturation. And also there could be a newcomer in the market that you never had heard of 30 years ago, and now they're coming to disrupt the industry. And that's what's happening.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful to kind of just give entrepreneurs like an idea of like how they might, approach their revenue model differently. And that it's kind of like your product market fit. It's like, it's not going to stay the same. It's like, you don't just finish it. It's like kind of an ongoing, continuous process that's always evolving, as your business does, and as the market landscape and your customers, all that. So I love the way you kind of laid out that progression.
And there's new categories. So like you may kind of bucket your business in a category. I have startups that are forging new categories on G2, and that's a whole different kind of modeling, but there's new categories that come up. And so you're like, are we this or are we that? I don't know.
Right. But I think that kind of goes back to like, taking the time to know your customers, know your data, and really be informed before you make those decisions. So as kind of, we kind of started touching on this a bit with this last question, but as inevitable market shifts or disruptions occur, how can entrepreneurs structure their revenue model in a way that ensures that their go-to-market strategy remains effective through all that turbulence?
Yeah, I like to use the house analogy here. You can put on a nice roof and nice shutters, but at the end of the day, if you don't build your house on sort of concrete, on ground that's sort of solid, the whole house is going to crumble. And based on the line of work that I do, I really see this kind of all the time. So all these things and components we're talking about is so important. They're not always super sexy to look at, your pricing models and your revenue models and your operations and your systems. But this is kind of the crux of what keeps the business alive and afloat. So I think super important. So if a storms come in, you gotta be prepared. So I feel like you need to build on flexible ground. You have to have a broad customer base, broad product base. You may be hyper-focused on a niche market, but then you may have other sort of ICPs, and you may want to go in and sort of like test what that looks like. I feel like you definitely need to have flexibility there. I think you also need to have these second and tertiary revenue streams in mind and some backup plans in mind. COVID, no one thought COVID was going to happen. And some businesses went rocket ship and excelled, like Zoom, for example. And some people were more brick and mortars, and they literally had to close their stores and kind of call it quits because they couldn't pay the rent at the end of the day. So, you just never know what's going to happen, I feel like. And then also, flexibility in your ideas. When things are down, I feel like you should have a kind of list of ideas of, if we're going to hit a downturn, here are some levers that we can pull in order to steer the ship correctly. So I feel like these planning and talking with your C-suite and your stakeholders and kind of scenario planning for the best sunny days and the worst storms are so important. I think a lot of people are just in this like fight or flight. When it happens, we'll get to it. But during COVID, I saw so many businesses just like pause for months because they just couldn't go online. They weren't flexible. They didn't know what Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams was. And had been remote for 5 years already. So I was like, oh, press this and leave this. Oh yeah, you're for half the meeting. And
Yeah.
so it's a real thing. And so you should plan for that.
Yeah, totally. Love this kind of emphasis on like having a contingency plan and just kind of like being aware of like what's in your control and what's out of your control, and kind of just accepting that like sometimes things are going to happen that like you are the one who has to adjust, not the landscape. So it's tough, but it's kind of, that's part of like the journey that we're on as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, inflation. I mean, inflation right now is a real thing. I mean, like I said, my bundle for Hulu is going up. I mean, the cost of a steak in New York City, you could go to a really nice steakhouse and maybe get a steak for like 30 something dollars. In New York City, you're getting like a porterhouse now for like 50 something dollars. And that's inflation right there. That's just like the cost of the ingredient has gone up. So the prices on the menus gone up because the restaurant spends more operating their business at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's the world we're living in, and we have to kind of figure out how to make the best of it for the business. So we've talked a little bit about customers, and to just dive a little bit deeper, customer behavior is always going to continue to evolve. So how might entrepreneurs integrate predictive analytics or machine learning to better adapt and respond to these changes?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of AI. I'm a huge fan of machine learning. I think there's some concerns, and I hear people's concerns. I think some people are afraid machine learning and AI is going to take their jobs. I hear you. I see you. I think you got to be smart and savvy about ways that it won't take your job. It'll actually make your job more efficient. For example, if I needed to hire a team of engineers to tactically execute something in HubSpot, maybe I would have needed a team of 3 or 4 engineers, and they would all be technical ninjas and they'd all have different skill sets. I can use machine learning and AI to bridge that team from 5 people now to maybe 1 or 2 people. And so I use it to my advantage. I feel like it could be my EA, my assistant, and I feel like it gives you an item, ways to categorize things, ways to personalize things. It helps with marketing messaging. It helps with inventory management. It helps to mitigate risks. It gives you an improved customer experience. I think a big thing is like meeting, you used to talk about customer before, like meeting the customer where you are. Like customers don't need to go through like a linear sales path anymore. So if they're on step 3 and they want to see a demo, just give that person the demo. If they have a pain point and they say, can your tech tool solve this pain point for my business? Just solve that pain point for your business. So I think it's really important to be flexible with machine learning, but I think it is a little bit like the wild, wild west right now. There are no standards. I know that with universities, there's thoughts about like copyright infringements and original thought, but I think if we can all kind of use it to our wisely and to help us, that's great. But I do see the concerns people have with AI and machine learning.
Mm-hmm. And then, so to just speak a little bit more generally then, like just on consumer behavior in general, can we just dive a little bit deeper into like some of the ways that like understanding like how that consumer behavior has evolved in a particular point in time, like how that will affect revenue growth, and how you might approach adjusting your revenue model to kind of meet your customers where they're at?
Yeah, I fundamentally think the days of the sales team is just going to hold the bag. And when I say bag, meaning like revenue for the entire business. And I've been doing this for 20, 25 years. Those days are over, where it's like, if the sellers make their goals, the whole company wins, and they're
Right.
sort of the shiny department. Those days are over. That's really not a way to run your company anymore. I feel like I always think of the customer journey as marketing, sales, customer success align. And so the silos and the walls need to be broken down. We need to celebrate collective wins. We all need to be revenue driving at the end of the day, even if you start for people to come into your orbit and then it gets passed off to the sales team and they physically close the deal, but marketing's continuing to hit them with messaging and pain points and case studies. And then they're finally a customer and you need to service that customer and they need to have a really good experience, because the customers, I read a study this morning on the B2B SaaS landscaping, the customers that come into an organization with a high kind of ticket of their first deal, they're going to end up staying with that company for a lot longer if they feel like they're being serviced by that company. Because at the end of the day, the cost of switching and ripping out tech and if things get sticky takes a lot of time, effort, and money. But if you can kind of give them a seamless experience through the customer journey, and this is what I help my clients with, they're probably going to stay with you for a really long time. And that's going to get you from 5 to 15 million or 20 to 70 million. And that's really important. And I think the days of customer success being a call center that it's like, how can I help you? And they're in some foreign land. Those days are over. Everyone needs to be client facing and everyone needs to think about how they can grow the revenue collectively for the team. And we need to stop pointing fingers like, if sales didn't do it, we're going to go out of business. That's just not the way to think anymore.
Totally, totally. I mean, for me, I think of Warby Parker, I have Warby Parker glasses, and it's just, they make it such a fun experience to find the right glasses. They make it personalized. And it's kind of like you said, it's about you as the customer. It's like, you can tell that it's like the entire throughout the customer journey, they're kind of there to service you and to make sure that you are happy and satisfied with the outcome. So I love kind of that, emphasis on the switch of direction. It's less about kind of the success of the sales team in and of itself. It's more about the satisfaction of the customers.
Yeah, and Warby Parker is one of my favorite brand examples too, because I don't remember if you know when they started. They used to send you home 5, because they didn't have brick and mortars at the time. They did the opposite of the retail model. They say, hey, Stacie, we're going to send you 5 glasses, try them on, pick which ones you like, and send them back, which I'm sure had insane logistics and sort of shipping costs. But now they've evolved into not only a glasses store that you can get your eyes checked now, brick and mortars, which they didn't start at brick and mortars. It was like a mail order, like a catalog at the end of the day. And you get contacts from them. You can get prescriptions put in your glasses. They've evolved so much. And I think they did it smart, because for them probably to open brick and mortars across the United States, let's say, it would probably cost them a lot of money. So I think there's a really smart business case there of how they grew the business.
Totally. Yeah. Love it. Love it. I'm going to keep going back.
Yeah. I'm a big Warby Parker
fan. And so kind of thinking about bringing together the different areas of your business, marketing, sales, finance, operations, and kind of with the intention of not having them, work in silos, how might entrepreneurs foster alignment and communication regarding their revenue model between these different business areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to have clear communication and transparency between the stakeholders of these various departments I mentioned. And I keep touching on sales, marketing, and customer success, just because we're talking about revenue modeling here, and finance and product. Everyone sort of needs to know what's going on. I feel like you need to have tools and systems. What we haven't really touched on so much is the systems part of the revenue modeling. I also am a big fan of revenue operations and go-to-market strategy. And so you need to have sort of systems and benchmarks, and I'll say checks and balances, where activities and communication of deals, of activities with the customers are happening within a system. So big fan of sort of Salesforce and HubSpot. And so if you have a CRM system where you can have multiple departments and people across multiple departments go in and find information about the customer, how bad of an experience would it be if you got on the phone, hey, Michelle, what is your company about? And then I pass Michelle to Jennifer, and then Jennifer's like, hey, Michelle, what's your company about? Like, that's just a bad customer experience. But if you had a CRM system like HubSpot, where you can go in and put notes in, you'd be able to know more about Michelle and her business, and you can kind of pick up the conversation from where it left off instead of starting from scratch. And that's why I think systems and a tech stack is just so important. Even if it's nimble and scrappy, that's okay. Just get in the process of recording and sort of document key parts of the customer journey and the deal cycle. So important.
Totally. Love it. And so, talking a little bit more about the data side, it's going to be really important, obviously, to maintain consistency. So what strategies or tools would you recommend to entrepreneurs to kind of maintain reliable data across these systems that contribute to the revenue model?
This is a huge one. And honestly, doing this for 20, 25 years, I don't know if I've seen anyone get it 100% accurate.
Sure.
Data hygiene is a huge part of being able to make these like data-backed decisions, whether it's based on your sales and your revenue modeling, your financial metrics. And I think people don't always get it right because it's just not sexy and it's not fun. Having to clean up 10,000 records in HubSpot is not a fun project to do, but that is something we do. So keeping your data in a CRM system healthy and clean with regular checks, audits, backups, data scraping tools, I feel like it's super important. I feel like if there's just your 10,000 records can have 2,000 duplicates. And so really you only have 8,000 potential customers in your database, but 2,000 of them are duplicated.
Right.
You're just not going to know that unless you really like dig in. So I think formulating some sort of system, make sure all your systems are integrated into each other. I consider the CRM sort of like the heart or the bloodline of the company. Make sure your integrations connect in, they're actually working, they're functioning, they're not broken, and developing some sort of center of excellence, a COE, where you say these are processes, these are best practices, some sort of like knowledge base. If a new employee comes into your company, how do they even know how to do their job?
Right.
A knowledge base is a good one. There's a tool called Guru that I really like. And then having training and make sure there's compliance with your data, SOC 2 compliance, or if you're in healthcare, HIPAA compliant. So I feel like there's so much out there for data hygiene. Just start somewhere and don't let it get to be this mammoth of a CRM and the data's bad and you can't really get any real-time reporting out of it, because that's just not a good place to be in.
Right. Yeah, you kind of want to set the system up so that it leads you to success rather than stress, because that's what it's there for. It's there to help you out, and hopefully if you have these tools in place, it can kind of reduce some of that extra busy work that you might have to do on your own otherwise.
Yeah, and you can leverage AI and machine learning. Pull out your contact list and talk to ChatGPT and, see what they can do about scraping your data, or hire a team that can scrape your data and do an upload back into your CRM. There's so many ways to do it. There's also software tools that do it, but depending on what stage you are in that sort of growth and maturity, you can do it really nimbly, or you can pay sort of like a SaaS tool to scrape it for you.
Right. Awesome. So to close out, we've talked a lot about, the different processes and systems that kind of go into supporting your revenue model. I want to just touch on change management and Why is change management important when it comes to implementing these processes and systems? And how can it help minimize disruption and resistance during the adoption of these new revenue-related technologies or methodologies that you may implement?
Yeah, this is so important to get right, I feel like, because everyone's uncomfortable when something new comes out, or everyone's uncomfortable when things change. I spoke with a revenue leader last week who said, we're moving into a SaaS modeling and a subscription modeling, but that's not how we've done the business for the past 5 years. And so I'm a little sort of out of my league here, Stacie. Can you come and sort of help me dissect what that looks like? And so there's a few things that you should keep in mind. Stakeholder involvement is key. Having the buy-in and support from the C-suite, the founders, the business owner, so key. And whatever sort of disagreement that goes on in the back rooms when you're kind of rolling this out to your team, make sure everyone's in alignment and everyone's on board with that. I think also what companies don't do, and I really stress this, is like transparency in your communication as much as you can be. I've been at a company, oh, we're doing so well. And then like 3 weeks later, they're like laying off half the staff. That is not transparent communication, and companies shouldn't be doing that. I mean, if things aren't going well and if things are tough, communicate that in a way that, makes everyone understand what the outlook is and what the runway is and what that looks like. There's so many startups that I've been talking to that are just running out of money at the end of the day because the fundraising is so scarce. And 2 years ago, you can raise a couple $1 million really easily. And now the level of scrutiny is just upping and upping and upping. Training and support, I feel like, obviously, if your roles change or your department changes, that's like super important, like enablement, like explaining to people what it was and what it's going to be. Or you're the head of CS, what does that mean? What are you responsible for? Are you servicing the client and carrying a quota, or are you just servicing the client? Feedback loops, I feel like, listen, you're always going to get negative Nellies, concerns, questions. Creating a feedback loop, a survey, a mechanism for people to voice their concerns anonymously typically is a really good way to do that. Celebrating the small wins. Change is hard, guys. We're human beings at the end of the day. Change is hard. So celebrating small wins, celebrating those milestones as it goes to completion. And I think having change champions. So if you're talking, 5 different apartments, things are going to change. So for example, for my client, we're revamping the customer success role for them. So there's a woman on the department that loves Salesforce. She's a super user. And so we ran by her the changes that we're making to the CS function. And she was like, love 90% of this. Here's 10% feedback of how you can even make it better. And before we roll it out to the larger department, we're pilot testing it with a super user. And I think that's so important. And the last piece, which I think is often so understated, is the change has to go with the culture of what the company is. The company has a vision, it has ethos, and I think it's so important that the change should fit with the ethos of the company. For example, we're on YouTube, we're on Zoom right now, but Zoom was a savior in the pandemic, and they ramped up so quickly. And now I think the CEO of Zoom is saying everyone has to come back to work, and then they're like, we're a platform that's enabled us to remote work. And so there's a big kind of controversy that's going on with it. So what are the ethos of the company? What are you changing? And sort of how does that align? And if it doesn't align well, how do you fit that narrative to make it a little more cohesive? Super important.
Right. Awesome. Stacie, this has been such an incredible conversation, and you've given just the most amazing overview of revenue modeling. If you had one key takeaway or piece of wisdom, either from this conversation or just from your experience doing the work that you do, that you wanted to leave with the audience, what would that be?
I'm a big fan, as I am my own business owner at the end of the day. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Being an entrepreneur and a business owner it's scary, but if you get the right resources and your right board of directors and your right trusted advisors, it doesn't have to be as scary. But I think if you're not uncomfortable as an entrepreneur, solopreneur, business owner, C-suite, you're probably not doing it right, because then you're just like stuck in the mud. So be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's the way you're going to change, learn, grow, and sort of propel your business at the end of the day.
I love it. Stacie, thank you again so much on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone here today. We're just so thankful that you joined us.
Thank you, guys. I hope this was helpful.
Awesome. And to our audience, we'd love for you to join us again for upcoming webinars, which you can view using that link that's going to be posted in the chat. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.